Today, everybody can participate in the writing of the past, in the creation of memory and history, especially in the cyberspace, and thus satisfy the need for memory and recognition. It is at the same time well known that collective memory crystallizes as a rule around sublime events and sacred figures and takes the form of big narratives. Over this territory and this history production, professional historians have no control anymore. They are just some of the many players on the ground whose main public function appears to be to endorse, through their institutional authority, one version of the past or another which is not of their own making. What happens with historical knowledge in such a situation? What is the purpose of objectivity, assuming it is accessible in the first place, within the expanding democratic field of memory production? To put it more dramatically, can we hope that any society will long support a profession that produces arcane trivia and calls it truth? Can there be myth-free historiography? And should there be such a historiography? It is in the sense of such demanding questions that I see the importance of myth-making and myth-breaking in relation to history and contemporary historical culture. The study of history continues to be shaped by a wide range of conventional myths. Indeed, there is barely a key normative concept describing modernity that has been spared mythologization. Liberty, revolution, progress, democracy, civilization and barbarism, national character, origins, modernity itself. More than anywhere else, Mircea Eliade once remarked, mythical thought survives in historiography. David Fisher's study of historians' fallacies, on the other hand, made this embarrassingly obvious. But there is a positive side to this link as well. The study of history, like the human condition it affects to portray, cannot entirely disengage itself from the irrational and the subconscious. As a form of human memory, it cannot entirely escape its own primitive heritage. Truthfulness and memorability remain perhaps the two most essential ingredients of historical study, and these, as we could see, are still the subject of concern and criticism. Yet, even if unattainable, truth and even objectivity remain the goal of most practicing historians. This is precisely where memory comes into play, for this mental faculty is a direct measure of the limits of truth. History is not what you thought, it is what you can remember, reads a small history classic, 1066 and all that. The intertwining of logos and mythos seems to make it impossible to draw an absolute line between fact and fiction, while truth about human conduct will ever be elastic and inexact. This does not mean that historians can cease to base their accounts on the past on historical record, that is documentary evidence, and to deal with this record fairly and logically. Nor do I count myself among those who assert that since objectively true history is not attainable, any version of history is just as good as any other. That since all accounts of the past are mythical and interest-driven, and we have no way of pressing beyond the various narratives, we must put to rest all questions of historical accuracy as well as all questions of responsibility for historical events. But I'm equally aware that membership in a group and participation in its sufferings and triumphs give meaning and value to individual human lives. Any other sort of life is not worth living, for we are social creatures. What gives cohesion to a group is a set of shared truths. Truths that differ from time to time and place to place with a rich and reckless variety. But despite all appearances to the contrary, at least three positive inferences for the professional historian can be drawn, I believe, from this observation, other than insisting on the opposition of truth and myth. First, Whatever leads to greater cohesion within a group has an inherent tendency, as we know, to increase tension with outside groups. It is the task of the historian, therefore, to study both the functions and the dysfunctions of myths. If there are myths that serve good purposes and others that serve bad ones, this is not intrinsic to the content of a myth itself, but to the causes for which it is employed. Even if it brackets the question of truth with a capital T, I consider this position engaging enough rather than cowardly relativistic, inasmuch it evokes the historian's responsibility as not just diligent myth breakers, but as powerful myth makers. Secondly, in the contemporary world, a tangle of social groupings lays claim to human loyalties, and thus to our sense of identity and belonging. What we need to do as historians and as human beings is to recognize this complexity and balance our loyalties so that no one group will be able to command total commitment. Together with William McNeill, we may then hope that a juster proportion between parochial and ecumenical historiography, between group or national and world history will thus emerge, whereby myth histories will become truer and more adequate to public life. All this may lead to rehabilitating the study of history in the present democratically organized field of memory production and ensure its return to the public realm. For this to happen, history shall always be written down in the present and, in fact, engage itself with the present. In this sense, at least, we may well agree with Croce's famous dictum that all history is contemporary history. In conclusion, I see myself and my fellow historians as truth-seeking mythographers rather than as harbingers of the truth. A high and serious calling, as McNeill once noted. Further work on myth is the general predicament of all historians, and in any case, as Hans Blumenberg suggests, the end of myth is the greatest, the most persistent, and, for historical understanding, the most illusory of all myths. Thank you.